Hello, welcome to the Eddie V Show. It's good to be back again with you on Wednesday. Is Wednesday. Lots going on, a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. Big show day. It's just Nick Fuentes again. But it's going to be good. We're going to be switching up a little bit. I do want to talk about maybe not, but just going to mention Iran. It's heated up again. A lot of good coverage on it from the usual suspects, so I won't get into it too much. But if you thought we were out of that, which it's so funny, when I talk to people in real life, that's what they think. They think that because they haven't heard about Iran in the news for like more than 2 days, that like the deal's holding up and the war is over. But that's not true. And anyone who's following what's going on knows that there's still a lot of stuff that has not been resolved. Also heating up in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. Not going to talk about it, just want to mention it. Just want to mention. Also, a buddy of mine was telling me from my episode yesterday, he had some good pointers for me in terms of the Muslims and the Mormons. I don't know if I mentioned the Mormons, but for the Mormons as well, saying, the Shiites and the Sunnis are different, and I acknowledge that they are very different. The Shiites a little more intense, a little more. I call it cool. I just think it's cool when there's actual authority, actual doctrines and dogmas in a religion. I just think if you don't have that, it's not really, it's just a fake thing. And then apparently the Mormons, and we were looking into it, they have flipped on some stuff, but it wasn't as bad as I thought for the Mormons. And he was telling me about the president. I think he said it's called the prophet too. So I want to correct the record on that. Hopefully you just took it more casually yesterday, just a casual thing about the Muslims and I guess religions in general. But it's good. It's good to correct the record. So shout out a little bit to the Mormons and shout out to the Shiites for holding down partially some stuff. Still, the Catholic Church is where it's at. There's just no doubt about it. So if you're wondering, read the Catechism. Stop playing around with your soul. But anyway, I just wanted to mention those things. I'm also wearing this shirt, short sleeve shirt. The person I'm wearing it for, she knows who it's for. I didn't even look in the mirror before I wore it. It doesn't look bad though. It looks pretty good. It's really hot where I am. So, this person didn't want me to get a heat stroke. So I don't even know if it does feel cooler and it doesn't look bad. It doesn't look too bad. And, lean is law. So we're not looking too shabby here. But that's that. The things we do for women. The things we do for women. It is really true though. Like what are men doing all these things for? I think the coolest, maybe not the coolest is the right word, but it is impressive in history when men have just done stuff to just do stuff. I think of Alexander the Great. Does anyone know if Alexander the Great had a wife or something? I don't know. Because he was far away from home for a while. But men, we're always doing stuff for women. That's like half of our lives, more than half of our lives. We do stuff for women. It's like, what else are we gonna do? What are you gonna do? You want to be loved by a woman, so you wear a short sleeve shirt. That's how we do. And then hopefully they care about you. But it doesn't look bad, actually. I kind of like it. Maybe I'll get more of these shirts. I keep blocking Mary. There we go. But yeah, and then like celibacy is the only escape from that. Not doing everything for women. That's why it's so, and this is something that comes up with me, because you have celibate people. If you're Catholic, you got the priesthood, you got the monks, and I'm sure there's other celibates, and then there's the incels. My brother had to tell me, he's like, that stands for involuntary celibate. I was like, wow. I don't think I actually knew that stood for that until he told me that. I knew it had to do with celibacy, but I didn't know the phrase. That shows you who I am. I guess I'm not with the times. I'm under a rock. But that's what gets me so much is when you have a person who's celibate, but then they still take marching orders from a woman. It's like, wasn't not the whole point, but like part of the point of you being celibate is like the opposite sex has no power over you. That's really not why they're celibate. but it's like, how can they hold power over you? You know, you're not gonna get married or anything. It's like, and this is a stereotype. This is probably not true often, but you do see it sometimes where you got like the parish priest and he's just like bullied by like older women, like some widows or just some older women in the parish. I feel like people have seen that. And it's just like, dude, you're celibate. Like, you just gotta, and I guess, yeah, celibacy doesn't make you a strong man. I guess it kind of signals, but then if you're an incel, if you're a priest, anyway, I'm gonna get off this topic. Anyway, we're gonna get into our topic today. It's gonna be a little different. I'm going to be talking about finances. So the background of this is there is a Groyper community, probably on all social media, but I just have an X account. And the Groypers are, I would call them followers of Nick Fuentes. Fun group, little wild sometimes, have a very specific belief system, Catholic, far right politics, some stuff in between there. You can look it up for yourself. But then one of them, apparently, I don't even know if he's a legit member of the Groypers. I am not. I read some of their stuff sometimes, which I think is sometimes great. But this guy apparently is a Groyper and he's a successful one. And Nick Fuentes is very much about like he wants elite human capital. He wants people that can actually change the country, have power, have influence. And this guy made like I guess he's a licensed financial advisor, and he made a little booklet or a book about how people can become elite human capital. So I was just reading it for fun. And as I was reading, I was like, this would be kind of a fun thing to talk on the podcast because I don't agree 100% with him, but I think a lot of the stuff is just interesting stuff to talk about. So, and I don't know his situation right now, so I'm not going to shout him out because like his X is down. I don't know what's going on with him. And I just got the PDF from some other Groyper putting the PDF online. So if the situation changes where I can actually talk to him or something, or if he even cares, I'll shout him out. But until then, I'm not going to. And I'm not going to put the PDF or anything because it's his work. He put it out there for free, as far as I'm aware, but it's his work and I can't communicate with him right now. So I'm just going to talk about the general topics of the book. But it is called, what is it called here? It is called Becoming Elite Human Capital. So that's the name of it. And he's anonymous, so I can't even shout out his name. So anyway, so we're going to talk about that. I'm just going to go through a big beginning section today, and we'll probably, as I go through it, cover some later stuff. Some of the sections I'm going to skip through, but some of the stuff I find interesting, I'll talk about it more. And this will probably be something I'll mix in with we're going through the spiritual life with Dr. Ralph Martin and the Saints. We're going through some other stuff. It's just a constant, I think I'll constantly stream it as I get through it. It is interesting stuff though. So hopefully you find it interesting too. It's not really, it'll be a little religion tangential. It'll be politically tangential, but it is really financial advice. So this is it. So at the beginning, he talks about how the advice he wants to give for Groypers or anyone, I guess, to become elite human capital is going to be the opposite of what most people receive as advice from older generations or financial advisors and different things like that. And he's going to mention these, and I'll talk about some of them. Just because I'm saying he says something doesn't mean I agree with it. So I'm going to say, and then I'll talk about some stuff if I feel it's necessary. So he talks about the standard advice a young man gets, and I guess, yeah, we'll go from there. So they say you need to like first pick your lifestyle, like how you want to live, and then figure out how to finance that lifestyle. So that's one. I do think this is true. I think we are sold a lifestyle very young, which is maybe not even from parents or people in our lives. It really seems to be dictated now by social media, by movies, TV shows. And look around and tell me if that's wrong. I can't tell you how many people have gigantic like monster trucks, but who do not need a monster truck. And I know that's just one thing, but if you think about it, it's like, why do you have a gigantic, anyway, that's really specific. But I do think this is true, that people try to like make money based on like this extravagant lifestyle that they want to live, or not even extravagant, just very specific lifestyle. Another thing he talks about is you're told to delay marriage as long as possible. I see this more with women, but it also happens with men. Like women, for the sake of their career, for independence, you just sleep around and you don't get married, which is terrible, terrible, terrible advice. But I'll talk about specifically for the men. You're told to delay marriage, whether it's for like security, to grow in wealth, to get assets. And I think this guy will honestly be, it's weird because he's saying don't delay marriage, but he sounds like he is a part of that crew. For me, I say do not delay marriage. And some people disagree with this, like you need to have a foundation. I honestly think if you get married, you will of necessity have to get everything figured out. And it's kind of when you're single, which if you want to be single, but it's really it's just an emptiness that it's not going to be that fun. But people have tried it and failed and succeeded in different ways. I don't think they've succeeded, but they probably think they have. But I would argue, even if you're like not financially settled, it's actually better to be married. And you will be poor. I'm not going to pretend you'll just automatically be rich if you get married. You will be poor, but I think it'll be more fun to be poor with your wife than it'll be to be poor by yourself or with your other poor friends. So, but anyway, he's saying that's what we're told to delay marriage. We're told to get just a corporate job and just work up the corporate ladder, which I think is very true. We're told to accept HR ideology. He didn't really explain that, but I'm assuming just like critical race theory or just stay in your lane, or like politics, religion, and your work are not related. He's probably not saying that. That's my spin on it, but he mentions that. He says that we're often told to retire at 65. And he's saying the results of all this advice is usually that men end up broke, single, and in at a mid-tier wage slaving job, in their 30s and 40s, which I do see that sometimes. I feel like I'm seeing it less now, which is great, but you do see that. You do see it. It happens. It happens often. So if you're not that person, great for you. If you are that person, it happens. And then he says also that usually people will, if they listen to this standard advice, they'll die in debt in a nursing home because they won't have kids that will help take care of them. They will have not created independent wealth that would have allowed them to not die in debt, obviously. So I think there's a lot of truth in those things that he's saying. And so we'll get into what basically his solution is. So he calls it the 3 pillars. And keep in mind, this guy is trying to build elite capital. I think when I talk about this, people will immediately be like, well, this guy's not trying to make like the rad trad Catholic family. It's like, yeah, I'm not saying he is. He's saying he wants to make elite human capital. I don't even know if he's Catholic. I don't even know if he's Christian, but we're going to still talk about it. So he talks about his way. This is his way. That was the standard advice. His way, if you don't want to end up broke, single, and in a mid-tier wage slave job, and if you don't want to die in debt in a nursing home, he says you need to focus on the 3 pillars. And he calls these 3 pillars wealth, resume, and family. The resume thing is probably not going to be super helpful for some of us, but I'm still going to talk about it. So he says wealth is not about consumption, but it's about being independently wealthy, and it's more involving your net worth. So we'll get into that more. And then he says the resume, he's doing this in a political sense. He's saying you need to build up your resume to affect politics, which I do think this needs to happen more with Catholics, because we let like these crazy blue-haired people, LGBT people, progressives, anti-religion, Masons, Jews, Mormons, et cetera, all these people, they get into like low-tier politics. They get into city councils and mayors and state representatives and stuff like that. And the Catholics are like, why aren't all the laws helping, traditional Catholic values? It's like, because we're not in the lawmaking class. So I think that's just a practical thing. But he's saying for resume, he's saying build up, community activism, being involved in your local political organizations, running for councils, building a network, stuff like that. And I think that can be very valuable. Even if you're not thinking of a political career or political activism, anything you're trying to do, I think that can be helpful for. So that's resume. And then the last thing is family. and he talks about how the first two support the family, the last pillar. So he says, and this is interesting with his delay thing from earlier, do not delay marriage, or he's saying standard advice is delay marriage. He's saying you want to get married with wealth and with a resume already built, which in theory would take time to do that. But he says, marry on that foundation, the two pillars before. Find a good woman. He doesn't describe who that is, but I would say a Catholic woman who adheres to the rules of the Catholic Church, which is harder than you think. Because I think a lot of, and this is going to get off topic, but I think a lot of women are catching on to this because women are seeing how miserable it is to live the single life, the single, free, loose life. So they want to find a good man, but they're just trying to LARP or appear like a religious person to find that man that has wealth, that will not leave them, that will coddle them, etc. Those are the negative connotations of it. So for men, I would say you got to be careful. Women, you got to be careful too. Obviously, if you're looking for a good Catholic man, you got to make sure they have the actual Catholic values, and not just LARPing it, not just showing that to find a good Catholic woman. Very important. But so he doesn't describe it, and I would say if you're a Catholic, you should know the qualities. But I will say a lot of Catholics seem to be maybe naive or something. Maybe I'm naive. I don't know about this stuff. Anyway, we'll move on from that. So good woman, and you're going to have to figure out those values, I would argue. You got to be the head of your family. That means if you're a man, you have to be physically strong, mentally strong, emotionally strong. If you are not those things, that you need to be working on those things. Virtue is something you have to work on. It just doesn't automatically smack you in the face. And then if you have those things, you can be at the head of the family. You already be the head of the family being the man. But to actually be a productive head of the family, to have that skill set, you need to work on those things. I'm adding a lot of my own stuff here. And then he says again, marry early, which seems weird because he just said you have to build those foundation stones, but then you got to marry early. I agree with him on the marry early. If you find a good woman, marry early. But he seems to be a little back and forth on that. So those are the pillars. And he makes a big point to say that the pillars depend on each other. So you can't just have like wealth and not the resume and the family. You can't just have the family, no wealth, no resume. That's his argument. I think for his argument, that makes sense. I'm always of the thing like young families, like it's okay to be a little broke, live simply. If you're trying to chase that crazy lifestyle, you're trying to play keep up with the Joneses, beat your neighbors, of course that's just going to make you miserable. You're going to, if you're not Catholic, you're going to get divorced. Even if you are Catholic, some people crazy. I'm not going to get into that. Maybe I will get into that. Like, it's crazy how not safe you are as a Catholic too. It's again why you have to find a good woman that actually believes in the Catholic principles, or a good man. But yeah, those pillars, it does seem that they depend on each other, but I think you can have a young family be poor. I think you could be super wealthy and just not have found the right woman yet. The resume could be later, could be earlier, but all are things to focus on, I would say. But he says they depend on each other. And he says that these three pillars, if you have, built these three up, that is what makes for elite human capital. And again, he's obviously directing this toward a political career, which is great. But I think this just applies all around if you want to have a moderately successful life. Obviously, there's more than this. You want to be an upright moral person. You want to follow God, pray, things like that. But this is in a certain sense, very good advice. He has a thing. I'm just going over a lot of the stuff because I just thought it was so interesting. But he has a little warning saying like the things I'm writing about is presuming that the American empire is still intact. The American economy is still intact the way it sort of kind of looks in 2026. That's fair. He says if there's a collapse, and I don't know if there will be a collapse because the world is so complicated. If it's going to collapse, it could be now. We got 2 wars going on. It's tense, but it probably won't collapse. But he says beans, bullets, and friends are going to be the most important things for you. And that is true. It's like you need food, you need defense, security, I guess you could say, and you need to have your buds. You need to have trust. That's why Catholics, we need to build up more community in this way, I think. Not for the end of the world, but you need people you can trust. So that's the intro to this whole thing. And I'm going to keep going. So that's just the intro. But he's going to break up the rest Well, he'll go over some more stuff, but then he's going to break up the rest of this document into age groups. So that's kind of interesting, and I kind of like how he did it. It's really helpful. But different age groups will have different, must do's in the moment and different things they're thinking about. But he's saying no matter what age group you're in, the pillars for him remain the same. Okay, cool. So then he's going to go off into a tangent, and I was telling my girl today I was reading a summary of the AI encyclical from Pope Leo because this guy the next thing he starts talking about is how every person who wants to be elite human capital should get proficient in AI. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And he was talking about it, and he's saying if you want to compete in the next world that's going to happen, AI is going to be beating everything. And in abilities, not just AI by itself, but a human being's ability to utilize AI. And he talked about different ways. But one of the ways he talks about is like the very paper I'm reading, the white paper. He said it was basically made by AI. He just talked into a phone, recorded his thoughts, and had the AI organize it for him. So I was like, that is very interesting. So I spent part of the day just like Googling possible things you can do with AI. And it's just like, it was a lot of stuff. It's not going to think for you, but it's very good at like organizing things and problem solving for you and stuff. So he has a whole thing on this. And he says, he recommends everyone subscribe to the paid account for AI. He's specifically talking about Claude. They have like a $20 a month paid subscription. And he's saying you can do a lot of things with it and you need to start using it today. And like I'm like I kind of like AI for researching stuff, but I'm not like a huge AI guy. But he was kind of convincing me. I was like, I need to learn AI right now. So it's just very, very cool stuff. He says, you need to know what AI is good for. And he's encouraging people to basically start businesses with AI. And to convince us, he says he started a software company with AI. And he's telling us that he is a financial advisor by trade. He's not a software coder or a software engineer or anything like that. But he was able to make some sort of software code to start his own software company and sell that software using AI, using Claude. So I thought that was fascinating. I downloaded Claude. I have the free version. I'm just going to experiment with it, but it was very convincing and interesting. The man was able to start his own software company with AI, and sounds like if he's telling the truth, making pretty good money for just teaching himself AI stuff. So that was kind of an aside. And in terms of the encyclical, I didn't see anything that was contrary to the encyclical. Pope Leo is obviously talking about like we can't let AI like degrade the human person, things like that. I would argue, and I read the summary. I didn't read the whole thing. It just seemed like a lot of very obvious things, like obvious things that people will obviously ignore, but obvious things where it's like if you're a person of goodwill, you know that you should not let AI like make you think less of human beings and not try to make a just economy and stuff like that. But if there's other things in that encyclical you think I missed, please let me know, especially when it comes to like making businesses with AI and stuff like that. All right, so now he's going to get into advice, financial advice directly before he gets into the age groups. And this is probably my favorite category. I used to be super into finances when I was younger, maybe in like my college years and right after when I was making pretty good money out of school. I was so into financial stuff. I was like, I'm going to retire by 30. I don't even know why I wanted to retire by 30. I was like, what am I going to do? I don't even do anything. But that was the thoughts I had. So I was very into it. So it was cool to kind of get back into those thoughts with this. Obviously, he had different thoughts than I did about finances. So the first two things he says, which may seem obvious, but I think a lot of people have problems with, is he says, stop bleeding money, first of all, and start growing it. I know it sounds like stupidly simple, but I see a lot of people, they don't budget. And so the money slips away from them every month. They're buying a lot of things. They're taking a lot of trips. Like when you drive your car, you're spending gas money. That's also maintenance money. So those are things that just kind of slip away. And people live some pretty, not extravagant lifestyles, but they live lifestyles that they think are normal, but are really just normal if you like watch sitcoms. Like eating out every day is not normal unless you're in a sitcom or, if you're a super wealthy person. But if you're a low tier wage slave, which is the terminology this guy's using, eating out every day is not a great choice, not a great financial option. And start growing it, means a job. I think this guy is leaning, I haven't finished the whole thing, but I think he's leaning towards starting your own business. So that's going to be a real way you grow. And obviously, he's going to utilize AI in that. But first, he's going to talk about budgeting. So he's like, you need to stop bleeding money. You need to start learning how to grow your money and start growing it. So first, he's like, you need to budget. So if you're budgeting, you first need to figure out if you're in debt or not. I am not in debt. So some of this stuff was a little boring, I guess more boring, but I'll still go over it. If you are in debt, listen up. But if you're in debt, they literally recommend, or this guy recommends a Dave Ramsey book. I believe it's a Dave Ramsey book called Total Money Makeover. So if you are in debt, he literally says, stop reading this and then read that book. So if you're in debt, I guess you can stop watching this and read that book. I have not read it, but I guess it has to do with debt. So he's saying when you're budgeting, the goal is you want to have no debt. And we'll get into budgeting too, but you want to have no debt. You want to spend less than you make per month. And he says forever. So that's like in any month that you're living, according to him, you want to spend less than you make. So if you budget out, and I'll give an app you can use to budget. Hopefully you are budgeting. If you're not budgeting, you need to start budgeting, especially if you're in debt, obviously. But he says spend less than you make per month forever. So do your budget. If you're not doing that, you need to figure out where you need to cut costs or you need to make more money. Straight up. And I agree with that. I think that's just healthy. That's just healthy finances. It would be insane to every month be making a certain amount and spending more than that every month. I mean, that's just mathematics there. And then he says, especially if you're in debt, but he even does it, and he sounds like a very wealthy guy. He says budget every dollar per month. And that's to do with the budgeting tool. And I just thought it was interesting. He mentioned that he meets with his wife every month to do their monthly budget. I don't know if I would do that. Sounds like a lot. I feel like you can kind of flow with it. You can kind of just have a general monthly thing and then only meet if it gets crazy. But we'll see if I'm not married. I'm single. So we'll see if that seems like a good idea to my future wife if I do get married. I think it sounds fun to do with your wife, but like it doesn't sound super necessary. Unless your wife's crazy spender, you're a crazy spender, do that. So the budgeting tool that he mentions a couple, but the one that I liked, I'll just get on my phone here. What was it called? It was called Every Dollar, and it's free on the App Store. I have an iPhone, free on the App Store. You can do that. I think he mentions Dave Ramsey's app. He also mentioned that Dave Ramsey's like approaching being a billionaire, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so use that budget, especially if you're in debt. If you're not in debt, I'd still recommend it. It'd probably be a good thing to do. But then he goes over, so that's the budgeting, saying like, what's the goal of the budgeting? You don't want any debt. You want to manage every dollar. You want to make money every month, not lose it. And then he gets into Dave Ramsey's baby steps. So these are going to be for people who are in debt or people just trying to get on their feet. It goes on the baby steps. Number one, $1,000 emergency fund. Sounds reasonable to me. 2, pay off all non-mortgage debt. Also sounds reasonable to me. Like really, we cannot be having debt. Debt, no bueno. I think another thing I would mention, it might be interesting having debt, is if you're starting a business that actually is viable, you might have a lot of debt from that, but that should pay back in the future. But I think we should be able to take risks. I think young men should be taking risks. Trying to start things great. Obviously, if you know what you're doing and stuff, but I can't tell you everything to do. So pay off all non-mortgage debt. And then he says step 3, 3 to 6 month full emergency fund. So after you pay off all those non-mortgage debts, you're going to get a huge emergency fund instead of that just 1,000 one. And then he says you're going to invest 15% of income to retirement. So this is going to lead to a retirement discussion. I am not necessarily against retirement in a general sense, which is like you're gonna stop working the job you've been working. I think people should contribute to society until they die, to the extent that they can. if you're super ill at 70 years old, I don't, I'm not expecting you to be like a full-time accountant or something, but there are ways you can contribute. And I really, how should I say this? Upset, disappointed. I'm disappointed in the older generations that just chose, specifically talking about Americans, it's probably in other countries too, that specifically chose to just like totally check out of society and just take all of that wealth and just burn it on like playing golf and drinking all day. I've seen this before. It is a real thing. And I'm not saying every older generation person does that, but like in a society, you should just be constantly trying to give back. Doesn't mean you have to work 40-hour work week. That's not what I'm saying. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to work for money if you have money saved up, but you should be trying to contribute. And then specifically to this, he says invest 15% of income to retirement. I am against the stock market. I don't know if that's for sure against church teaching. It's not explicitly, obviously, if it is. So I don't know if this is a fair thing, but if you're waiting, you could maybe, or if you're thinking about investing and you're a Catholic and you're like, Eddie or New Polity has some good points, you could probably just wait until the Pope speaks on it. Because the stock market's been around for a long time. So you could make the argument that the popes would have talked about it being evil by now. That doesn't change my mind, but I want to be generous to people because the papacy, as far as I know, has not explicitly talked about the stock market. But this guy says invest 15% of income to retirement. You know my thoughts. And I have a show, I think, about it as well on retirement. 15% is a lot. I tend to more say that your kids can be your retirement. They'll help provide for you. Obviously, you'll have accumulated capital, like you'll have probably a house, some other assets. So you're not going to be like, just out of luck if you don't save up 15% of all you make on retirement. And I mean, I think your kids will take care of you. This is only going to apply though if you're like okay with living a simple sort of older life. Like I don't think your kids should I don't think, and this is just, you should not do this, make your kids support like your decadent old lifestyle. That's just not what I'm talking about. And if you're old, like, what are you doing? Anyway, he says 5, save for kids' college. I am not planning on saving for my kids' college, to be honest. I did not have any help paying for college. I have no college debt. I think it is possible. I didn't even go to community college, which I think is a great option. Do your first 2 years or just do community college all the way, associates, depending on what you want to do, trade schools. But I'm not planning on saving. If one of my kids shows like is really talented at a young age at something and really wants to do something, I might think about it. But honestly, I don't think it's necessary. And then the 6th is pay off house early. That just makes sense if you can. And then 7, he says build wealth and give generously. I like that. I like that. Give generously if you got the wealth. So yeah, that's the beginning of his financial thing. Do I want to keep going? Yes, I want to do the big don'ts. How long have we been going here? Okay, I'm going to stop here. So that's kind of the intro. I'm going to be walking through this more and more. I think it's just very helpful. It's kind of an interesting topic. And honestly, just for me, I find it very helpful to like reinvigorate like kind of what I'm thinking financially. So I'm going to do that. And you can walk with me. You can walk with me in that if you would like. But I think there's a lot of good advice there, and I'll be commenting on it as well. So I think that's all I'm going to cover today. So if you found anything interesting, let me know. Like, comment, subscribe. We're going to be continuing it. It's only 55 pages, I believe, so it shouldn't take too long. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to do it tomorrow, but I will be doing it throughout. I'll be sprinkling it throughout for sure. Awesome. All right. Well, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. And God bless you. God be with you. And I will see you next time.